Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live. We're actually here with two men who have swum across the notorious False Bay. Welcome, gentlemen. Ryan.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. So first of all, Ryan, you set a new course for everybody. Sort of explain the background. Where is False Bay? You know, what are the traditional obstacles to the swim and everything around the swim, to give everybody a background?
Sure. Well, firstly, hello to everyone, and how's it, Ned? Good to see you. Steven, thanks very much. False Bay is a body of water in Cape Town, South Africa. It is a bay, as the name suggests. It's about 33 kilometers as the crow flies directly across the bay. Its greatest reputation is for a feeding and breeding ground for the great white shark. So it's one of the most populated great white shark bodies, or it was until recently anyway. It is a body of water that ranges from around 10 degrees Celsius. Steven, can you do the conversions for me? 10 degrees Celsius up to about 22 degrees Celsius at certain times. So it's got a big temperature range. And it is a body of water that's extremely unknown from a swimmer's swimming point of view. Up until this point, there have only been 6 successful solo swimmers, and I think between 25 and 30 attempts at the swim. And it remains, you know, it's often compared to an English Channel. I get the question the most, you know, which is more difficult, English Channel or False Bay? They are completely different. The similarities are the distance, and that's about where it stops. You know, I could give you a very long list of differences between Channel and False Bay, Steven. Maybe we'll get into that later. But yeah, it's just a body of water that I believe is going to become an extremely popular swim. It's a very difficult swim. Conditions are everything. Selecting your course, whether you're swimming from east to west or west to east, is going to be a big choice of everybody. There have been 5 successes from east to west, and I attempted it from west to east as the first success. And I managed to get the speed record, and I'm not exactly the fastest swimmer out there. So the perception now is that that's the easy route. But I can't wait for the next person to try that route, because I think I got a little lucky, and I was very clever on my date choice.
Can I add one more? Can I add one more thing to that? So this reputation of the great whites, in past times, there's a breeding colony of seals in the middle on an island, and the place was absolutely full of fish, and 200 great whites believed to be in residence. I think one of the things that Ryan probably glossed over is, from the time anybody's a small child in Cape Town, they're always hearing about the great whites in False Bay. The tours went there, the beaches at Simonstown, the whistles blew, the flags went up, get out of the water, the sharks. And I don't know if they still exist, but there was a whole group of federal employees or county employees or state employees called the shark spotters, who spent their entire time up on the hill with a pair of binoculars, radioing down, going, get them all out of the water. There's a shark, you know, big shark coming to the beach.
That's very much still there, Ned. And, you know, the sharks, we have 2 resident orcas that come in. We call them yin and yang, and they generally chase the great whites out the bay, but they do then come back in. So as we speak now, there are great whites. There are plenty great whites in the bay. Maybe not the numbers that they used to, but they come in and out. So it's not like they've disappeared and are no longer there. So the shark spotter role, they are positioned all along the coast. And that flag system and that whole program is still very much in place and necessary.
Yeah, the average South African swimmer believes the chances of getting killed by a great white in False Bay are 100 times greater than being killed in an automobile accident, which of course is completely wrong, but there's a mentality.
Very much so, yeah. You know, and then you jump into False Bay before the sun's up and it's pitch dark. You know, that's one of the things that you know, people ask, what's the difference between English Channel or other channels and False Bay? So specifically on English Channel, besides all the physical difficulties of the swim, the mental difficulty of that swim is quite extreme. You know, when you are right out in the middle, it's still, or even, you know, if you lose the sunlight and it gets dark and you're exhausted and you're cold and you know, the wind is blowing, then you've still got that feeling of what's down there. Because there's plenty wildlife. There are 13 other species that live in False Bay, of sharks that live in False Bay. Then you get the orcas, and you get the you know, obviously the seals and the dolphins and everything that stings you as well. So it plays quite heavily on the mind, and that's a great attribute to this swim.
Both of you gentlemen, Ryan first and Ned, tell me the water temperature, the time you took across, and what you saw out there, if anything. Go ahead, Ryan.
So, yeah, sure. So me first, the temperature, and I waited a long time for this. There's a certain period where you can get the water above 18 degrees. It goes right up to 22. I had it at 18.5 was the average, which for me is you know, if you keep moving, a very comfortable temperature. So it goes right all the way down to 10 degrees. It's currently sitting at 12, but I had it at 18.5. Stephen, I saw lots of seals that swam underneath me just to you know, keep my wits about me. And other than a very, very nasty patch, about a half a kilometer stretch of blue bottles, which I swam into right on the shore, 2.5 kilometers into the swim, which really nailed me. I had nothing else to worry about besides the wind and the conditions.
Got it. And Ned, you?
So I went down around Christmas in 2012, and I gave myself 9 days, which is kind of a stupid plan, but it was the plan. And I always said to the organizers, I want a day that's possible. In 9 days, I'm not going to get a perfect day. So I want a day that's possible. So I, like Ryan, I saw lots and lots of seals. You'd come in, you'd have your feed, and you'd look over, and there'd be sort of 8 seals having a chat, you know, 10, 20 meters away. And you had to tell yourself that if the great whites, you know, are going to interrupt the picnic, they're going to interrupt their picnic, not your picnic. The one thing I did see, which was still very memorable, is about halfway through the swim, I was swimming along, and there's no rocks in that part of False Bay. You know, it's just relatively deep bay. And the boat on my right, I breathe to my right, the boat on my right, all of a sudden stopped. The front went down, and it did a kind of dramatic turn, and everybody fell down. And I'm thinking, well, if you hit a 7-meter great white shark, that probably would cause something like that. Well, what had happened was a steering bolt had broken on the boat. But I think what Ryan will tell you is that compared to English Channel and those kinds of things, False Bay, you've got a mental challenge every nanosecond of the swim. Every time a seal goes underneath you and you see that shape, every time something happens, you need to grab your heart, tell yourself it's going to be okay, and keep swimming. So it's incredible mentally tough swim.
Yeah. And Ryan, even though you're local, you had that same sort of, I don't want to say fear, but awareness that something might happen.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. It's, you know, I want to say this in inverted commas, I don't worry about the sharks. In other words, I'm not going to let the fact that it's a known breeding ground and feeding ground in False Bay, it's not going to stop me from swimming. And I push it to the back of my head because I've done the maths, I've done the research. I know the odds are very unlikely, but it's always there. You know, you do think about it. I'll be swimming and in the flow and in my zone, swimming for hours, and suddenly my hand hits a piece of seaweed even, and that jolt that goes through you is quite phenomenal, and it pulls you right out of that mental state that you were so happy to find. So yeah, that all is very real, whether you're local or not. But I'm a little bit more realistic, you know, on the odds. I understand odds, and the odds that anything's going to happen are so small.
Yeah.
And when the seal swims across the back of your legs, you have a similar moment of
indeed, yeah.
thought. Yes.
Now, in the back of your mind, because I know you gentlemen are ice swimmers, channel swimmers, marathon swimmers, extreme swimmers. You guys have done it all collectively. Um, uh, Ryan, you've been down to Antarctica. I mean, you've been all over the place.
Yeah.
Now, I know when you do that, you have a checklist. Okay, feeding bottle, escort boat, etc. Do you have a contingency plan when a shark actually encounters you? You must have some sort of thing, not that they attack you, that they're around you. Do you have like meditate, keep my heart rate low, or some
Yeah.
kind of contingency plan?
Yeah, Stephen, I have, it's one of those things where you don't really know how you're going to react until it happens. And I was swimming in another coastal resort in South Africa called Plettenberg Bay. And I was training for the North Channel. And everyone had said to me, don't go out into the ocean. This place is really bad. And of course, I went out, which I'd done many, many times before, on a beautifully pristine morning early. There wasn't a single boat or paddler or swimmer. It was all by myself, and I was swimming from one bay to another. So when I was halfway across, I was quite far out, crystal clear water, and I'm swimming along, and my eye caught something, which is usually a seal or a dolphin or something pleasant, or a sunfish. And in this case, it just looked different. And you take a deep breath and you look, and here came a great white directly underneath me. And it was a big, like a submarine. And you wonder, like, how are you going to react? And firstly, I put my head up and I realized that there isn't anyone close by. So, this is, no one's going to even know. And I managed to calm myself completely. I was very impressed. Took a few deep breaths, and I just, I held my breath because I didn't want to take my eyes off it. And it literally swam from behind me underneath, and it kept going. And I was just thinking, you know what, that's going to be such a cool story. I actually had a GoPro shoved in my Speedo, and I was trying to think, oh, I'm brave enough to pull that out and get some footage, but I wasn't. And that shark got about 10 meters in front of me, and I was still watching it. And with that, it did like a little turn, and it looked at me, and we made eye contact. And I promise you, I lost every little bit of cool that I might have tried to lead you gents to believe I had. And I swam 250 meters back to the beach at a pace that, Flippin' Phelps would not have caught me, I guarantee. But to answer your question, the only, I kind of have the knowledge, and it's the risk you take, that you probably in all likelihood are not going to see the shark that's a threat to you. So if we see a shark that is identified or not identified, if identified as something that's not going to bug you, that's fine, I'll keep swimming. If they can't identify it, or they think it might be a great white and it's not even bothering me, I'll probably get out of the boat anyway. However, the one that's going to actually be a problem is the one you don't see, especially in False Bay. The great white, it looks for deep water and it comes from below. If you see it, then it's identified you as something that it's not that interested in.
Got it.
I don't know if that answers your question. I don't really have
No, that's great.
I'm relying on my crew and having a shark shield that gives a little buzz in the nose of the great white, which I don't think really is going to interest the shark in the slightest. But, it's there for my parents and my family, for their peace of mind.
So Steve, on my contingency, and Ryan probably agree with this, it wasn't my problem, the shark, or not shark. That was a problem of the boat crew. So they had a different kind of stress. What I had was this, as Ryan said, in the back of your mind, this threat is there. I would never have described myself as a particularly mentally strong swimmer. So False Bay for me, it was my best swim ever, particularly from a mental standpoint. You had to be mentally tough to do the swim, because every time something happened, you need to check. Yeah. And there were about 6, 7, 8, 9 of those incidents where, as Ryan said, your hand hits something and you don't really know what it is. And once the little seal goes by you, it's okay. But when it starts, you don't know how big it's going to be.
Yeah. And for both of you, the swim itself was your traditional swim. So your feeding regimen, your pace, where the boat was positioned. That's all channel standard, correct?
Yes.
for me, very much, yeah.
Okay. Now, Ned swam the quote traditional way, and Ryan, you flipped that over. What was the reasoning behind you going the other direction?
Merely watching the wind conditions, Stephen. You know, the prevailing wind in False Bay is a southeaster. And the southeaster generally brings warmer water from deeper ocean into the bay. And if you're swimming the route Ned took from east to west, the southeast doesn't exactly get behind you, but it doesn't hinder you. The opposite of that is the northwester, which is meant to bring cold water, but then that pushes the other way. But I've been studying the weather charts for a while and looking at, you know, this wind blew and then the water went up, that temperature. It literally can change, by the way, in False Bay. One day it's 12 and the next day it's 18. There's a big variance. So trying to get it all aligned is what really bugged me, or made me take so long. So I looked with the guy Derek Fraser, Big Bay Events, who are fantastic support crew down here, and that I've got a great relationship with and great trust in. I worked with Derek, and we decided that trying the other way is quite potentially a very good idea, but we don't know. And of course, as I said, it turned out to be a great idea for me. Literally a week later to the day, it was a terrible decision for Andrea Mason, who swam in flat conditions. I had wild, big waves and horrible chop, but yet, and it wasn't behind me, it was all side on, yet I flew across. Andrea had flat waters and nice warm water as well, and it took her 10.5 hours, extra 2 hours.
Okay. Okay. Now, you were thinking about this for a while, whereas Ned said he has a 9-day window. Ned, from the time you thought I got to do False Bay until the time you landed in Cape Town, how many was that? Years, months, days?
Kevin Murphy had told me I should do it years ago, and I just ignored Kevin to do a lot of times. And I probably had the bright idea in about November. I contacted Hugh Tucker, who I have the same confidence in that Ryan has in Derek Fraser. And Hugh is resident in False Bay. He's also an honoree now in the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. And it always was Hugh's goal to do False Bay. So I called Hugh and said, Hugh, look, I'm looking for something to do over Christmas. I always knew this was special to you. Do you want me to find something else and leave this, you know, the next swim to you? And he said, no. He said, look, he said, come down. So literally it was, you know, booking tickets within an hour, and from the brilliant idea to landing in Cape Town was maybe 5 weeks.
Wow. But now you obviously had enough marathon memory in your muscles, and so you were physically capable of swimming this, correct?
Yeah, I'd done Catalina in September.
Got it.
And I had a fantastic swim, great conditions, really, really fast time. So my confidence was good. I was, had the meters done, and also realistic. I going down, I said, well, okay, you get a day, you won't get a day. I wasn't going to throw a temper tantrum or anything. And like Ryan said, if the wind is blowing from the south, you got Antarctic waters on the surface. If it's blowing from the north, you've got Saharan temperature. So it's a really funky place. I think that the funny thing for me is that, we were going to go and not that day, going to go, not that day, going to go, not that day. We finally decided on the day, and my boat pilot called me up and he said, look, I've had a call from the shark spotters. And they're recommending we don't do this. And I said, well, they're recommending no one does this for 50 years. Why, that's the least of our worries. Let's go, we'll do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great, Stephen, if I can as well, just one of the challenges of False Bay for me being a local, and I say this in a lot of talks, when for example, someone living in Cape Town goes to do an English channel, you get a week of window, and you prepare for that week, and you fly to Dover, and all you do in that week is focus on weather charts and the right day to swim. There's no taking your kid to school and play dates and work and meetings and business trips and all of the things that happen in life. When it's on your doorstep, it's very hard to say, right, sorry, no one talked to me this week. That's the window. Life goes on. And I've missed so many opportunities, and it's just added to the level of procrastination. So sometimes that forcing, you've got, as Ned said, 9 days to do it is a big, is a win.
Yeah.
Definitely is. But I also owe Ned a thank you, because I emailed him when I was still thinking it and saying, hey, Ned, I still haven't got in false bay. I've got to do it. And Ned's usual wordy self on email was like, stop overthinking it, get in, doesn't matter if you fail, demystify it, full stop, boom. It's like, okay. It's like, shit will get off. Excuse me.
I did have a text. I had 2 texts after the swim. One of them was my favorite text of all times, and it said, I am jealous. It was from a famous marathon swimmer. And then another person sent me a message that said, it wasn't a bad tone, but it was something, you were very lucky. I've been waiting 25 years for a perfect day to do that swim. And I just thought 25 years, go get wet,
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ryan, being from Cape Town, what do you recommend someone from overseas does to attempt this swim, or even start planning this swim?
Yeah. Well, good question, Stephen. And firstly, since my swim, and I know, Ned did it, and 4 other people other than Ned and myself have also done it. But since I've done it, there's been, I've had a flurry of interest and people contacting me from all around the world on interested in doing it. So I'm actually helping a lot of people who are also trying to demystify it for themselves. So in terms of the training, in terms of distance, it's my GPS at 33 kilometers, almost on the nose. So that's the distance you got to train for. And that's the same as any channel. I do the total body confusion, which I think, it's a term I picked up when I was training for the English Channel. And that is, don't ever get into any kind of comfort zone if you want to try false bay, because it's going to throw everything at you, from cold water to currents to waves that come, and big waves. You at one stage, you'll be 15, 16 kilometers away from any coast. It's the real world out there. Prepare to be stung, and don't be scared of a jellyfish sting. You almost, I know it sounds weird, but it's part of the training. If I had never been stung by blue bottles or jellyfish before, and I swam into what I did 2.5 kilometers off the coast, without a doubt it would have messed too much, because it's very painful and it's very disconcerting, and you have no idea how long it's going to go on for and what the poison's going to do to you, even if you're brave enough to take the pain. So that to me is important. Put yourself in an environment where you're going to get stung mildly, and toughens you up mentally for that. And I think that leads me to the most important point on a false bay training. And it's, again, similar for many other channels, but you've got to be mentally strong. You've got to probably do a little more research than anywhere else. If you take the Ocean Sevens channels, most of those have dedicated pilots and people who know the currents and have specialized in it for years. False bay is still an unknown. There have been 6 successes, now 7. One Andrea did in the wetsuit, so we should count her, but she most certainly did it in a phenomenal swim. So let's say 7. The boat pilots are still learning. I have studied it, and I've worked with Derek Fraser, who knows his stuff, and we got it right for me and didn't get it right for Andrea a week later in much better conditions. So there are a lot of unknowns. So those who wanted to come to False Bay within the next year, you're going to be part of the pioneering team. I reckon the first 20 swims, you can consider themselves pioneers of the swim. So put that in your training pipe and smoke it a little bit. What else? It's not much else I would add, Stephen. It's just you need to be mentally tough for this one.
Yeah, I'd add a couple of things. Unlike Dover, Cape Town is a fantastic tourist destination. Fantastic place, gorgeous place. My first swimming experience was 10 days in Cape Town. I swam the short route from Robben Island. I know, Ryan, you've done about 100 of those. I swam around Robben Island, which is about 11K. And I swam the famous Cape Point swim, all in 10 days. So if you go to Cape Town, there's a longer swim from Robben as well. So if you go to Cape Town and the swims aren't on, it's a beautiful place to hang out and have a beer and have some fabulous food. If False Bay isn't on, there's a lot of other great swims to do down there. So I would say, go swimming in Cape Town. It's beautiful.
Ned, I love that. Yeah. So you're bringing that angle in. And again, I actually typed an email to someone very interested in coming today. And they've asked me to put a program together, and the list of swims that they can do in the build-up is really amazing. You know, not also to mention that, you know, something like Robben Island, that's where Nelson Mandela spent 18 of his 27 years incarcerated. You know, it's a phenomenal. You'll feel emotional about that swim. And yeah, as you said, Ned, Cape Point is a wild, woolly swim. It can be proper, and it's one that every open water swimmer should try. And there are so many others. We also just got into something called adventure swimming, where we don't even go from A to B. Sometimes it's just nice to go somewhere in False Bay along the coast. Yesterday, I went out with Lewis Pugh on the Hout Bay side. It's just on the other side of False Bay, because Lewis is training for something, trying to get as much cold water as he can, and he doesn't like being in the cold by himself, so he throws me in with him, and it's great fun. We go for about an hour and get really cold, but we go in most unique, unbelievable, aesthetically beautiful and scary places. And as it demystifies, more and more people will do those.
I love that. I mean, you know, we always talk about a pace swimmer, someone that's swimming next to you, but you've got like a pace extreme. You're a pace extreme swimmer. That's a cool thing.
Like
it's worse than that. Lewis probably had Ryan swimming on the outside of him. So if there was an attack, Lewis could get to shore and call for help.
Lewis actually, it's funny. He pulled just behind me, and I was pacing him because I'm a little fit and a little quicker at the moment. So he's also, I'm giving him the push that he needs. But I wanted to tell you a funny story. You mentioned Hugh Tucker, who's in the Hall of Fame, and he's a great friend of mine. I've got every respect for that guy. When I first started swimming, Hugh made an attempt on False Bay. And in good Hugh Tucker fashion, he said, Ryan, you're very welcome to join me. So I was like, wow, okay, cool. It was like the day before, not knowing much about swimming, but just knowing, you know, in those days, False Bay was thick with the great white shark. I hadn't done the research or got my head around it, so I was still quite worried. And we pitched in False Bay that the next morning, probably a week later, whatever, and it was still pitch dark, and I looked at something that I didn't recognize, and Hugh was swimming in a cage. So he had made this cage apparatus, but it was only big enough for one swimmer. So now you try to be the swimmer with you, but you're on the outside of the cage. You can see each other, but you wave. That's about it. Anyway, the cage eventually broke, and you had to swim out of it. So we were in the same boat, so to speak.
That's great. Now, I live out here in Southern California, and just north of me in San Francisco is another shark swim, Farallon Islands. Have either of you wanted to go to around the world? And no?
Stephen, I don't know much about it. I've certainly heard about it, but as you said to me a little earlier, you know, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are watching this now, you know, they've never heard of False Bay, so it doesn't mean a lot to them. I think it's the same boat. But is that in the same, where exactly? It's not close to Alcatraz or...
Yeah, yes.
Where are
So
you?
it's just west of the opening of San Francisco Bay. So you swim straight out from the Golden Gate Bridge. Catalina is very much south, and that area is called the Red Triangle. It's called the Red Triangle because a lot of surfers primarily, but also divers, have been attacked there. And it has more or less the same amount of success and failure, single digit successes and many multi-digit failures.
I think Craig Lenning did that, did he not?
Yes, Craig Lenning, Kimberly Chambers, you know,
Ted Erickson.
sort of the who's who of cold channel swimmers.
Well, I'll see if I can get that done before Ned Denison. I don't know if it's possible.
I'm trying to think of what we would call the Big Shark 3. So, you know, but you have Farallons, you have False Bay. They're like the cream of the crop. Rottnest has some, Molokai has some. We need one more.
Rottnest.
That's a question. Yeah. Well, anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to be popular, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, only for the hardcore.
Guarantee we put it out there and all you guys will go after it.
The other thing that no one mentions, and right, you and I haven't had this conversation, but I definitely stopped watching the Discovery Channel the weeks before I went to False Bay. None of this sort of, leaping great whites taking seals and thrashing about. I didn't watch any of that stuff the few weeks before I went down there.
No, I'm exactly the same. I don't, because that does actually freak you out. I remember a few years ago watching a documentary on the most dangerous places to swim in the world, without any idea of what the conclusion was, as it built from number 10 all the way up to number 1 on their program was False Bay. But how they portrayed False Bay, I promise you no one would put their baby toe in that water. But yet hundreds and probably thousands of people swim every day, surfers mainly, not distance swimmers, but all along the coast. It's plenty of people in that water. So again, just to promote the swim, don't be scared of the sharks. We talked a lot about sharks. It's just a mental thing that you do have to overcome. But another huge plus that neither of us have mentioned is that South Africa, we work on the rand. So if you're coming on the dollar, that's $15 to the rand. If you're coming on the pound, it's about 22 rand to the pound. You're going to live, you're going to feel, even if you're not rich, you're going to feel properly rich here. So come, pull in.
I remember before False Bay, I went to the bank a few times to get the cash for the boats. I was a proper drug dealer stack of cash. And I was trying to remember whether it was $400 or something. I don't know what it was, but compared to most swims, it was relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, good.
Here in California, people say there are more sharks now. There may or may not be, but there are two factors that have increased the sightings of the sharks. And one is the popularity of stand-up paddleboarding. Now people are standing up on a paddleboard and they literally can see down. Their perspective of what's underneath the surface is much greater. And that's been a huge increase in the sightings. And two, the use of drones. And the drones over the ocean, you can see how close the great white sharks are to almost every beach in California. And I'm wondering if it would be really cool to have a drone follow one of you guys over False Bay, just to really get an idea of what's down there.
Yeah, you probably don't want to see that footage, to be honest. But there are two other things that I'll add to that, Stephen, because those are two very good points. The other thing is obviously the increase of smartphones and instantly having a camera in your hand, and of course social media. So everything gets, in the past you saw a shark, you tell your buddy and he tells you his buddy, and that's it. Now it goes around the world in 5 minutes, and that perception goes up, and that drone footage that you talk about, it goes around the world in a split second. So that's probably adds to it as well.
Yeah.
So there was a funny conclusion to my swim about a year or so later. Theo Yacht, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, he was the first one to do 100 Robben Islands, and I know he's a good friend of Ryan's. I was at the Cork Open Water Conference at a table with Theo at lunch, and somebody asked me the question. They said, "Did you see any sharks while you were swimming False Bay?" And I said, "I didn't see any sharks." And Theo said, "Don't worry, they saw you."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd like to add one other thing, Steve. You talked about kind of big swim memory, and I'm a great believer in big swim memory. So the big swim memory is you're out in the middle of somewhere and your left arm goes numb and you go, "Yeah, I remember that went numb before." Or as Ryan says, you get stung by a bunch of jellyfish and you go, "Yeah, I remember these guys. I actually remember the time they got me on the lip, and so far they haven't got me this time on the lip, so I'm okay." And the whole shark thing is part of big swim memory, which is, how many times in a swim have you had that bit of, terror, panic, come in for a nanosecond? And Steve, you helped me one time. I still laugh about it. The most common shark in the world is the wave shark. You might know this wave shark, right? When you look over next to you, there's this perfectly shaped wave, and you go, "Oh, yeah." And we've all seen it. And having done False Bay, my big swim memory, my resilience, my toughness is so much better than it was before. You just kind of say, "Oh, well, what are you afraid of? A little barracuda went by you. At least it's not a 7 meter long great white. Come on, snap out of it, Ned.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, I love that.
What I like about Ryan's description of when he saw the great white shark is exactly the same memory that every channel or marathon or ocean swimmers ever had with a great white shark. It's this huge object. It's just almost not even swimming. It's just moving. And it's so elegant and so efficient in its movement in the water. And what is striking to me is, Ryan, you kept your eye on it. Penny Palfrey kept his eye on it. All the other swimmers who have seen great white sharks, I would think I would just be in shock and I would look away. But for some reason, this magnificent creature is so unusual that every open water swimmer that I've talked to and have seen a great shark has said they've been memorized by this movement.
Yeah, a little bit of amazement and awe of its beauty, but also, I don't want to take it out of my sight because I want to know where it's going. I want to make sure it's heading away from me and it doesn't turn around. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. And it's quite funny. I've still got the GPS tracker on my watch where I'm swimming in one direction and suddenly there's a 90-degree angle to the beach. And I was only brave enough to pull my GoPro out on the beach.
Yeah. Ryan, you also mentioned orcas.
Yeah.
Now, have you seen any orcas in the area?
Personally, I've never seen them. And to be honest, that's a big bucket list of mine, Stephen. A lot of people are really scared of them. And I know they're highly intelligent and they've got the ability to obliterate you in probably a lot quicker than the great white shark. But I would give a lot in a natural environment to swim with those guys. I really would. I actually really hope they'd come on my swim. It was my personal little wish they didn't, but no, I've never seen them. But there are often reports of them, and they actually, and they kill them. The sharks don't all disappear. They also kill them. They eat their livers.
Yeah.
So they're not particularly popular, but as scary as sharks are, I really appreciate the beasts and very, very pro-conservation and understand their place in the chain. So I'm not that happy when our orcas come and eat their livers and our great whites wash up on the beach.
Yeah.
So there's two things about that, Steve. I think the first thing is the orca's dorsal fin is about the size of us. It's about 2 meters. So that, you just have to put that in perspective. And then the second thing is on the great whites, people are of the impression it's kind of this sleek, slender torpedo thing with teeth on the end. The great white is like a really stocky old phone box. It doesn't have to line up to eat Ryan. It can eat him lengthwise. It's that far across.
Yeah. In my twisted mind, I think, if I were ever attacked by an orca, I would just be swallowed. Whereas if I was attacked by a great white, it would just take a limb. So I don't know which was the worst way to go.
I don't know. I don't think you're right, Stephen. I think if an orca was irritated with you, and I don't think there's any record of an orca hurting a human or intentionally that's in the wild anyway. I'm pretty sure they'll rip you to shreds. They won't just swallow you whole. They'll play with you with their tail. They can be quite mean, at least with seals. I mean, they throw them around with their tails.
Oh, wow. Well, I rethink my mindset.
There was one point, Steve, in my fault space swim where I was getting near the end. And you're starting to do the mental calculations, right? And at a certain point, about 50 meters offshore, I said, okay, now even if they take my leg, I can make it.
Yeah.
I can clear the water, and that'd make a good story.
Yeah.
Well, that's brave of you, because I was trying very hard not to get to any point in that swim where I let my mental focus say, right, I've got this, it's in the bag. Because I tell you, that body of water, like many others, but False Bay particularly, it's going to surprise you as soon as you let your guard down. I remember even when I was 3 kilometers off the coast, then we did hit a current and it did hold me back. But I was still so mentally focused as well. And I had the added pressure, by the way, which you didn't have, Ned, that I was set to get a record, which is a lot of pressure on me. Especially when you're told that you're still 18 kilometers offshore. And you're like, do I ignore the record or do I now try and speed up for 18 Ks, which was not part of my planning.
Ryan, you're assuming my crew didn't tell me that. My crew had written instructions to lie to me. They were telling me I looked good, I was young, I was beautiful, I was on record pace. They were telling me all sorts of lies.
Okay, I'm not sure why you took so long to get across, Ned. You know, for me it was freaking easy.
Yeah,
you were getting
I was happy to get there.
I had budgeted, by the way, for a 12 to 14 hour swim. So in all seriousness, when I really put a lot of thought and mental training into it, and the little tricks I play is when I'm allowed to moan about something. So I had told myself that I'm starting in the pitch dark. When it's dark again, then I'm allowed to start looking up and asking how far are we, and starting to use some choice words. But until that point, I wasn't allowed. I was just meant to stay positive, and those are tricks that I use. So when I reached the end and it was still 2:30 in the afternoon, it was a wonderful. I almost felt robbed, to be honest. I've paid this so much mind and I've overthought it, as you suggested, Ned. And all of a sudden it was done. I almost wished it had taken longer.
Yeah.
So how many years, Ryan, was this on your list?
Oof, long.
25, 30?
No, it's been on my list for many years, but it hasn't been a goal, so to speak, until probably the last. I've got another goal that involves False Bay. That's it's a little bit bigger than a solo crossing, but that was on and I never got the weather window. So it was off for a couple of years. And then I decided, right, I need to do a solo. And that solo was for about 2-3 years, actually, talking about the solo. I'm not allowed to talk about it. My mates, one of the reasons I did it was that my close mates were saying to me, please don't miss this weather window, because if we have to hear another year of you doing False Bay, it's not going to work for us.
You won't have any friends left.
No more.
Yeah. Ryan brought something up about marine conservation and a lot of things. And we all know, especially people in the movie Jaws, that really brought the great white shark to global awareness. Discovery Channel and its Shark Week is similarly promoted this ferocious, animal out there. Do you think if this movie and this television series had never occurred, never been seen by the public, do you think we would have this fear or this impression of sharks? I mean, is it media driven or is it real?
I think that drove it for the first 20, 30 years, Steve. But I think now social media and the drones and the paddle boarders, I saw one the other day where some woman in New Zealand was swimming with 3 orcas kind of playing around her. They're big animals. So I think there's enough social media today. I mean, if a kid died from eating a paperclip, we'd all know about it and be terrified of paperclips. I guess the other thing I would say is, and Ryan talked a little bit about risks. A few years ago, I assessed the risks to my life and I stopped using the cell phone in the car. That was by far the #1 risk in my life to being hurt or killed, was using the cell phone in the car. Yeah, #1.
Yeah. True. Stephen, I agree with Ned as well. Look, I definitely believe Jaws movie played a massive role in sharks being the bad guys. And I think, Ned, maybe it's still a lingering perception that sharks are man-eaters. They're not man-eaters. They really are not. And we all know the stats on the odds of you getting taken by a shark are so much less, and I'm not going to get into that. But a lot, even my close friends who've been mates with me forever are still, they're convinced that the sharks are waiting for you to jump in to come and eat you. It's just not the case, and I think that's still a hangover from that movie.
Yeah. Well, if you both of you gentlemen had the ability to do a 30-second, 1-minute pitch on why someone should do false bait, what would that be?
Who's going first?
Yeah, Ned first.
So for me, and for the longest time, I was one of only 5 people who ever had the drive, the courage, the insanity to do this swim. And there's something really cool about being a pioneer. And I think Ryan is correct. The first 30 people that do something, everybody is still learning. So, you can go off and do the English Channel and be one of the 2,000 people to do it, or you can go down to False Bay and be number 8.
Thank you. Great.
Absolutely perfect. And Ned, I'll add to exactly what you said by saying you get to base in Cape Town, South Africa. And I promise you, I'm obviously biased, but I've lived here 47 years and I still absolutely love the place. If you're not in the ocean, you're on the mountains, the beautiful mountains down here in Cape Town. You can go up to Johannesburg and do all the safari and see the big 5 and lion and buffalo and giraffe and all of that. So the attractions around the swim when you're good and ready are phenomenal. And also you have, what I'll also say is choose your support team well. There are few boat skippers out there who are now starting to take false bait quite serious and they're learning quickly. So I would, we're getting the experience. I use Big Bay Events and Derek Fraser and those guys I highly advocate. And make more of a holiday of it around your swim. It's not, with all respect to Dover, there's not a lot you can do there. Cape Town, South Africa, different story entirely. The swim is a phenomenal challenge. It is right up there, if not bigger than an English Channel or a North Channel minus the 12-degree water. As Ned said, it's still very pioneering. So come and be in our top 30.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been really educational and inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Good to see you, Ned.
Take care, Ryan.
I hope you come back to South Africa. Stephen, I hope to
Will
get
do.
you. You've been here, Stephen?
Not to Cape Town.
Okay.
Peter
That's my
Smith.
next mission.